as a good postseason. And because the other teams have missed out on some of their portal guys, all they can go after are the national championship teams guys for 5 days. So they go get whoever they want and they go offer him a bunch of money. And now the guy comes back to Ohio State's coach. I didn't want to leave and I still don't, but I can't turn this down. And then Ohio State's in a situation where they either pay him what he asked for or he leaves and they have no recourse. Their roster's already set. But how do they pay him more? Like I said, the roster for next year is already set. They've already negotiated with the guys on the team for retention. They've already negotiated with the freshmen coming in, and they've already negotiated with their transfer portal guys coming in, which means whatever budget they had, it's all allocated. So they don't have a pile of money to just give a bunch of guys more money at that point. So they're screwed. Those guys are gone. Hey, it's Juck. We are not bemoaning the noon kickoff. We are now owning it. It's a badge of honor. We're the lunatic fringe that defines our coach's legacy when it comes to this game. They don't get to define that outside the family. We're cut from a different cloth for Ohioans. He's got it all, man. He's even got the jaw. You know the jaw. You see that jaw and you're just like, yeah, man, that's a dude. Do I want Michigan to beat Oklahoma? No way in hell. I don't know what world I'm living in. This is insane to me. And if you saw my outburst, I apologize. It's showtime now. Did you miss me? 2 days off. How about that? I was not off at Buckeye Huddle primetime last night, but I haven't been on Juck on Bucks for a couple of days now, and I got to tell you, it was a much-needed rest. It was a much-needed rest. There are times, and it's interesting because you probably think I'm a really talkative guy. I'm not. I'm actually kind of a quiet guy. I'm actually kind of shy, which goes kind of against this right here, right? You probably wouldn't imagine that I'm a pretty shy guy. I am. I'm a shy guy in person. If you met me, you know, obviously I would talk to you and say hello and be happy to meet you. But if we were just sitting making small talk, I'm not good at it. I'm kind of socially awkward. I'm kidding. I'm a big mouth. I'm a total big mouth. But I did enjoy a couple of days off. There actually are times when I come and I try to do the show and I'm like, how do I do this? I can't even figure out like what to say or what order to put it in. And I had a couple of those days. Also had my anniversary on 11/11, and she planned it that way so that I would never forget. And I've only been accused of forgetting it one time, and that was just an accusation. But today, we talk about the biggest issue for these Ohio State Buckeyes, potentially, through 9 games of the year. What is the biggest issue? What's the potential chink in the armor for these number 1 Buckeyes as they roll into what I consider to be the postseason that actually starts up in Ann Arbor? Ann Arbor, then you got the Big Ten championship, hopefully. And I got to add that caveat, right? A lot of you guys got mad at me for talking about the Big Ten championship and said, we need to be focusing on the game and not talking about anything past the game. And I get it. If I was the coach, I certainly wouldn't be putting those thoughts into the players' minds. The thing is, we're not the coaching staff, so I can just go ahead and talk about it. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I'm not affecting the players. What we do, is big a part as we are of this whole thing, doesn't really affect what happens on the field. So we can talk about the Big Ten championship. It'll be okay. I'm not discounting the game, but obviously we can't change what happens. And the truth is, I'm having a hard time even talking about the game this year. I've wanted to talk about it. I certainly will talk a lot about what it means and everything around it. But when we actually talk about the matchups, like it is difficult for me to even get into the matchup of the game, what it could potentially look like, because last year should have looked totally different than it did. It should have been totally different. What's the point of even talking about the matchups when you could just get on the field and nothing makes any sense? Like last year shook me to my core. I have no idea how to discuss the actual on-field matchup for this game in 2026, 2025. But we'll obviously talk about that all week next week as we've got Rutgers. And after the game against UCLA, we will be 13 days away from the game. Anyway, this week you got UCLA in a night game on Peacock. Hilariously, my wife just asked me yesterday, can I cancel Peacock? And I said, better wait. And then I found out today that the game is going to be on Peacock. Now, this game against UCLA presents a huge opportunity, both in how the Buckeyes play on the field, what they get to work on, and I think they're going to work on something in particular, and what it means outside of the game for recruiting, a huge opportunity for the Buckeyes to bring in a list of visitors that includes some studs to try to close up this class of 2026 and some guys for 2027 that they may not have been able to bring in had it not been a night game. We've seen that several times this year, but our third night game this year, which is fantastic. I think the environment's going to be awesome. I think the uniform matchup is tremendous. I love UCLA. They're in the top 5 of my Juck on Bucks official Juckeye uniform rankings. Now, when we talk about this class of 2026, it turns out the writing on the wall was there for us, and we might have been able to figure it out, but it goes against the grain so much from what Ohio State under Ryan Day has previously done. This class, totally different than it's ever been before under him, as they usually sit back and sit with a full class and just put in a couple pieces towards the end and try to hold on to their class. Everything's in early. And this year, a bunch of holes left, and they're going after flips at the very end. And it was meticulously planned from the beginning. In addition to that, something they don't usually do, it's going to be bigger than usual. We thought it might be 24 guys. It might be more like 30. And one of the things Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni have been so good at during this era is trying to stay ahead of the change and at least having a plan. It might not always be the right plan, but they put a plan in place based on all the factors, and they try to implement the plan. And then they pivot from the plan. They're never just totally caught with their pants down saying, oh, shoot, what should we do? But the program is really in the best possible position it could be right now with this class of 2026, based on the money and the finances they've had to work with. I think the actual football program has done a fantastic job. And there are 5 huge changes that have affected this recruiting class and recruiting going forward as it pertains to Ohio State. And it's going to affect Ohio State recruiting moving forward in the near future, both in how they operate and in the sizes of classes that they take, which will continue to be very large classes. And this is how Ohio State has responded to these changes. What are the changes? Number 1, and Ryan Day talked about it at his press conference on Tuesday. One of the things he said is we need to get as much information as possible about these guys. We need to do our due diligence because you got to be right. You're putting a huge investment into these guys, and you got to do right by the university. Now, a huge investment was already being put into these freshmen. What he means by this is now with revenue share, it's the university's money and not some collective's money. So I do find it interesting that all of a sudden we are super buttoned up and financially responsible when it's the university's money. As someone who's donated a lot of money to the collectives over the years, I noticed how much more financially responsible we are now with the money. You do got to be right, though. I get it, but it is human nature. I understand. The second thing is there's just one transfer portal window, and that's it. You get it right one time. You can't go back in the spring and make up for errors or make up for somebody leaving after you thought you signed everybody you needed. The third thing, the timing of this one transfer portal window. If you're a team that competes late into the playoffs, you're trying to operate that one transfer portal window while you're competing for the ultimate prize. The fourth thing is that if you are lucky enough to be a team that makes it to the national championship, congratulations. Now it's open season on your guys for 5 days, and you have absolutely no recourse. And it happens at a time where if you are a competitor in the playoffs, you're a big disadvantage. And the fifth is Ohio State is at a disadvantage without offering guaranteed NIL deals. Ohio State is compensating players with revenue share and the opportunity to work with the Buckeye Sports Group for third-party NIL deals, which is great. But much of Ohio State's competition is offering both of those options, and in addition to that, guaranteed NIL deals, which they can then pay off using their collective as the business legally through NIL Go by piecemealing off small gigs for the players until they pay off what they said they were going to give them. And that's all legal, but Ohio State's not doing that. So those 5 huge changes have led to Ohio State's big strategy change here. Huge investment in the players, no spring portal. You're in the playoffs during the portal, which makes it even more difficult to be right and evaluate properly. Should you accomplish your goal and make it to the national championship, it's open season on your roster and nobody else is available for you. And number 5, the lack of guaranteed NIL deals. And because of these 5 factors, the Buckeyes have made tweaks to how they are going to go about recruiting moving forward. As for the huge investment in the players, there cannot be misses, and these guys need to know everything that they can about these players that they're not 100% sure on. They're still going to offer and get plenty of guys committed early that they know are their can't-miss dudes. But after that, there's usually a bunch of guys they go after next that they feel, pretty confident about. It's those guys they're now waiting on and getting as much senior film as they can, which is risky because a lot of these guys are already going to be committed, and now you got to flip them. And you got to flip them in most cases with less money. A very risky strategy that we're seeing this football staff execute flawlessly. Then you got the portal issues. Number one, you're playing during the transfer portal. And this is also a huge stressor of making sure you get the recruits right, because you're not going to rely on the portal as much. You're going to have misses in the portal. And they're going to take as much time as they can to get the recruits right, because they know they're going to have misses in the portal because they're limited. The coaches are limited during how much they can recruit during the portal. They're trying to win the championship. You can't be screwing around so much in the portal. Open season on their players is the last one. Open season on their players, if they win the national championship or just make the national championship game. Here they've pivoted by taking more guys than they usually would. And that's why we're seeing this week so many more guys come in. And that's why we're seeing Emmanuel Ruffin in the class, the 4th defensive tackle, because of these portal changes that somebody can come in and poach somebody off their roster and leave a hole. That's why we're seeing James Laurinaitis, who was looking at adding a 3rd linebacker, to now definitely going to add a 3rd linebacker. Tim Walton, who was going to add at least one more corner, maybe a 3rd. Now I think definitely going to add a 3rd. Tyler Bowen, who would have been fine with just 4 offensive linemen, definitely going and grabbing Mason Wilhelm to make a 5th. All these positions that Ohio State would have taken another guy became, you have to take another guy. You have to, because you cannot have a hole in your roster at the end of the cycle. And how would that happen? That would happen where a guy tells you, I'm not leaving in the portal, but then he has a good postseason. And because the other teams have missed out on some of their portal guys, all they can go after are the national championship teams guys for 5 days. So they go get whoever they want, and they go offer him a bunch of money. And now the guy comes back to Ohio State's coach. I didn't want to leave, and I still don't, but I can't turn this down. And then Ohio State's in a situation where they either pay him what he asked for, or he leaves and they have no recourse. Their roster's already set. But how did they pay him more? Like I said, the roster for next year is already set. They've already negotiated with the guys on the team for retention. They've already negotiated with the freshmen coming in, and they've already negotiated with their transfer portal guys coming in, which means whatever budget they had, it's all allocated. So they don't have a pile of money to just give a bunch of guys more money at that point. So they're screwed. Those guys are gone. So to counteract this, you got to make sure you get the guys on the front end in recruiting, and that's what they're doing. Bravo. Brilliantly thought out plan. Kudos to them. Ryan Day also talked about versatility in the guys they're bringing in now that they've gone from 120 to about 100 guys on the roster. Got to have more guys, even on the scout team, that can do more things. Brought up Xavier Johnson, Mitch Rossi. We've seen Nate Roberts using him at a tight end, using him at fullback. So guys that can play multiple positions. And he said versatility is so important for us. Every year the roster is getting shorter and shorter. Now we're just at 100 guys. That means everybody's got to have versatility. And one of the guys that is super versatile that I just had a conversation with that I have to share with you guys, Legend Bay. Obviously, we talked a ton about Legend Bay. You know how excited I am about Legend Bay. A crazy athlete with the ball in his hands. Buckeyes flipped him from Tennessee, where they wanted to use him as a receiver, and Ohio State pitched Legend playing all over the place. And people have made the Curtis Samuel comparison. And to me, it wasn't quite a Curtis Samuel comparison because Legend undersized. And though he can do everything, Curtis, you could line him up. Curtis could take a pounding in the backfield. And Legend, in my mind, wasn't quite that size to be able to handle that. And that's because I was looking at all of his measurables that he was listed at on the recruiting sites. 5'9", On Rivals, 175. On 24/7, 5'10 and a half, 185. On ESPN, 5'11, all over the place, which made me think, okay, probably a little undersized. And I had seen him described as that way, and that's just what I had in my mind. And I never asked him directly because usually guys that are of that size, and in my head, I'm thinking like a DeMario McCall, just a little bit stockier, right? Because the way he moves looks like a guy that size. Well, I got somebody who messaged me the other day and said they had seen my short that I made on him and said, I think you should check on his size. I think you might be wrong. Wrong. Guy said, I think he's 6'1", 200. What? And I'm thinking this dude's crazy. So I asked him. Now, like I said, I never asked him before because I thought it would be kind of rude. If you're an undersized guy, that's all people talk about, and that could probably really irk you. And Legend said, I'm currently 6'1", 196. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people who think that he is exaggerating with that answer. And it's very true. Many people do that. And maybe he is, or maybe he's not quite certain. Maybe he's off an inch. Who knows? Maybe he's off 2 inches. But the point is, even if he is off 2 inches, even if he's 5'11", 196, this is a totally different player now, a totally different athlete in my head than what I was thinking. Because at 5'11", that's not undersized. That's Isaiah West is 5'11", 210. If Legend is 5'11", 196 pounds, that means he'll be 210 at Ohio State. That means Legend Bay moves like that at Isaiah West's size at Ohio State. And that is not DeMario McCall, just a little bit stockier. That is legitimately Curtis Samuel, only I think based on Curtis coming out of high school, I think he's got more. That's scary. Remember, this is a guy who ran our wind-aided 10.23. This dude is insane. And now, to think that he's that size, different ball game for me. So if I gave you the impression this was an undersized athlete and you had in your head, like I did, tremendous news. Again, whether he's 5'11", and he, he's 2 inches off, which is fair, right? If you're going to say that, that's fair. I don't think the guy's saying he's 4 inches taller than he is. That would be just ridiculous. Some people are saying no way. I'm telling you, man, he said he's 6'1", 196, and maybe he's wrong, but even if it's 5'11", totally different ball game. Now we're talking a dude, Isaiah West size, that moves like that. Game changer, because now you can just, even if you don't get creative about it, I know some people like, Ohio State's never going to get creative with him. You don't need to. Now, I mean, he can just be a legit running back or a legit slot receiver at that size. Like, you don't need to work in ways to use a guy that size. He could just be a running back. And if he is, like, that's a ridiculous running back. The skills that dude has, insane. So now super, super, super duper excited for the dude, even more so than I was. But let's move to UCLA. UCLA at night. And let's first talk about the 2026 guys that are coming in to visit. And we'll start with who we hope will be Tim Walton's third corner, CJ Bronaugh, out of Windermere, Florida, where all the fancy golfers live, including Tiger Woods, the 14th ranked corner in the country, who plays against not very good, lower ranked Florida competition. And as such, isn't extremely polished. But what he does have is the size and the measurables. Jay Timmons, he's got polish. Jordan Thomas has polish. CJ Bronaugh, a little bit more raw, but crazy gifts. 6'2", long, think Aaron Scott kind of build. And he is extremely fast, track speed fast, faster than Jay Timmons and bigger than Jay Timmons. And this is a guy that would be a fantastic get that would also, from the class perspective, boost the Buckeyes big time. For instance, if he were to commit and he said it's down to Florida and Ohio State for him as of now, we know how the Buckeyes do official visits. He's coming in for an official. If they could get him quickly, and I do think they still have money for wiggle room in that corner room, they're still down a number. And if they could get him in, this would boost the class, take over 6th place, and move them even closer to 5th, which is exciting. Now, everybody else is going to make additions here late too. But you've also got Dre Quinn coming in. You need a defensive end to pair with Kari Wilder. You've got 4 defensive tackles now, and then you got your crown jewel of that defense, and that's Kari Wilder, the number 1 defensive lineman in the country out of Junipero Serra, California, an absolute man already who I think walks in and is playing in the rotation by the time the season starts. A defensive end playing as a freshman at Ohio State. And he's not just going to play at end. He's big enough and strong enough, I think, to play the Caden Curry role. He'll be lining up at nose. He's that kind of dog. But to pair Dre Quinn with him, a 4-star out of Buford, Georgia, who is a 4-star, roughly 400 players, so right at the bottom edge of the 4-star cutoff, 6'4", 6'5", 225, moves great, young for his class, a tremendous athlete. Love what he brings to the table. The body type that we don't usually see. And I would liken his skill set more similar to Chaz Coleman than Zion Grady. And I would absolutely love to get him in the class. Now, he is a former Clemson commit who, again, this is opportunistic by the Buckeyes. He bounces out of Clemson. Texas was his original backup plan, or his number 2. Buckeyes get in it immediately. They've been in hard the whole time. You got Tennessee involved, Miami and Georgia Tech, hometown Georgia Tech, trying to keep him home. He said his decision could be next week or closer to signing day. We'll see. Based on how the Buckeyes go about these OVs, you could get a quick decision, and this could be all good news. And then you got James Laurinaitis trying to get his 3rd linebacker, Braxton Rembert coming in. And remember Rembert, the kid who went to Caleb Downs High School, well, still goes there, and is committed to Wake Forest, his only P5 offer. Now, why would Ohio State go after a guy with only one P5 offer? Obviously, because James Laurinaitis sees a diamond in the rough. At 6'5", 200, you can't coach that. You can't coach speed, and he's very, very fast. I question his lateral movement, but that frame can't be taught. And it's surprising to me that a kid with that frame and that kind of speed only has one P4 offer. But James Laurinaitis wants to take a flyer on this guy. Hey, man, who's to say James Laurinaitis is going to be wrong? Let's get him. So I'm excited about that one. Then at end, you also got J.J. Finch coming in. And J.J. Finch, who is committed to Alabama, a 6'3", 260-pound defensive end out of Warren High School in Indiana, a high school that produces a lot of talent. I prefer him when we talk about the 2 bigger defensive ends that Ohio State is after right now. So you got J.J. Finch and Jimmy Frisco Saliufu, who is of some relation to Epi Satanile from Katy, Texas, who's committed to UNC, who I think eventually is going to have to move inside. I don't think it's a foot speed to stay at end. J.J. Finch does, and both of them 3 stars, but J.J. Finch, to me, much more 4-ish star, much more bluish chip than Jimmy Frisco Saliafu. And I mean, I think the offer list says that as well. Obviously, Finch committed to Alabama, got all the big offers. Jimmy Frisco out of Texas with huge production in high school, committed to North Carolina. So this one big with Jimmy Finch and Dre Quinn both coming in to potentially lock down that defensive end spot. Then you got your linebacker, then you got your cornerback, and that is all for the class of 2026. Then in 2027, you got the big surprise. Keenan Bailey gets Brock Williams in. Brock Williams, the number 2 tight end in the country. I'm sorry. Yes, he is number 2 tight end in the country now. And he is down essentially to Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas. And Georgia and Texas are playing this weekend. He's elected to come to Ohio State. 6'5", 210 out of Illinois. Second year in a row, Ohio State going after an Illinois tight end hard. And Keenan Bailey missed out on Max Sutter. Is he going to miss out 2 times in a row? I don't think so. Keenan Bailey puts the pressure on, man. He's going to get this one. Then you got offensive lineman Jackson Roper, a 4-star out of Colorado, 6'4", 290. Dewey Young, I love that guy. Who could not love Dewey? A 4-star out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, 6'5", 285. and a superstar edge rusher in the class of 2027, 4-star out of Will Howardstown, Downington, Pennsylvania, who is a top 100 kid and an edge rusher. Then Matt Guerreri is maybe the most underrated recruiter in the country. He brings in, out of the state of Texas, 2 of the top 10 safeties in the country together on this visit. Eli Johnson, 6'3", 190 pounds, came and camped over the summer. Guerreri fell in love with him. Top 100 player, top 10 safety. Then you got Jaquan Snell, who to me is the number 1 safety in the country. Also a Texas kid out of Waxahachie, which is Calvin Simpson Hunt's hometown. 6'3" as well, 198 pounds. These dudes are both amazing. And if he can land one of them, he's done it again. He's done it again. After going from Fahim Delane to Blaine Bradford to Simeon Caldwell with Blaine Bradford, and now you could grab Jaquan Snell or Eli. It would be fantastic. In addition to that, James Laurinaitis has a 2027 linebacker coming in named Blake Betton, who is a 6'3", 220-pound linebacker from right by his hometown in Minnesota, which is really cool. The kid talked about, knowing who James Laurinaitis was from local lore of James Laurinaitis from this high school close by, which is really cool stuff. So that is our recruiting update for the day.